Hello world, Kyle here with NimbleNoggin.io, and we're back. Not exactly in the Swift Component Store app, but we're in the same general area as the Swift Component Store app. You can't see it, it's here in the background. But the reason that it's not front and center is that we're not exactly still on the tour. We're talking about Autolayout. And today's video is going to be about the where of Autolayout. Where do I use Autolayout? And that question's a little broad. I'm going to narrow it down and make it a little more specific. You can use Autolayout with Interface Builder or in code. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on each and why you should use it in Interface Builder. And if you're not using it in Interface Builder, that's fine. It's still simple enough in code. It's just harder and a little more work. First, let's talk about using Autolayout programmatically in your code, in your view controllers. So when using Autolayout programmatically, there are two different ways that you can use Autolayout programmatically. The first one of those uses something called a visual format language, and the second of those is just a method with a lot of parameters. So this first process to create constraints for your views requires some more specific knowledge and something you most likely haven't used anywhere else in your journey through iOS, and that is the visual format language. So here we are in an iOS developer library resource for Autolayout in the Autolayout guide on the page working with Autolayout programmatically. And I'm just using this as examples for setting up Autolayout in your code, as I'm not doing it anywhere in the Swift app because it's just easier in Interface Builder, and you are going to see why. Not saying that this visual format language is hard to learn, but unless you're using Autolayout with the visual format language constantly, you're probably going to need to keep this visual format language syntax page open all the time, or at least when you're working with Autolayout in this way. And you can see here that there's a lot of stuff to remember, and reading some of these strings, you don't even know what they mean or what they're trying to say. What about this white box 1, black box 4, black width, red box? You might be assuming that there's a white box that goes next to a black box, but there might be a little spacing with this black width string, and then next to that, after the spacing, is the red box. It's not completely obvious at first, and it's going to take a lot of getting used to and a little bit of practice to even get started with it. Back in this other document, again from the Auto Layout guide, we can see this visual format language in action. So here in this example, Apple is showing the end product of what they're trying to achieve with this layout. With these auto layout statements, they want button 1 next to button 2 with a little bit of spacing. And here we can see the visual format string that they've created, and after we've seen the end product, it does seem kind of obvious, but when using this on your own, you have to think of this on your own. It's not just reading it. Speaking a language is harder than understanding a language, but it does make sense. Button 1, 12 pixels of space, then button 2, placed horizontally. And here it does say that you can just use a hyphen for a standard aqua space, which I guess is 12 pixels, but who knows if that will change in the future or if it's even changed since this document was created. It looks like these buttons are from previous versions of iOS. And how we use these visual format language strings in Autolayout is that you have to create an NS dictionary of something called variable bindings, which you use like this to sort of store references to the items you're talking about in your visual format string to use when you're creating the constraints. And you can create an array of constraints like with the visual format language using constraints with visual format and passing in your visual format string with some additional options and metrics that usually come with some more customization that is a little more advanced, and then you pass in your views dictionary so that the string can get references to the objects you're wanting to talk about. And then you can add your constraints to a view. So not only being a little more complicated and requiring you to learn this new syntax, the process using the visual format language cannot even do everything that you would need or want to do with Autolayout. And you can see here that although most of the constraints that are useful in real interfaces can be expressed using the language, some cannot. Down here, this code example is using this other method with a lot of parameters to achieve the same effect by placing button 2 12 pixels to the right of button 1. And you do that with this constraint with item method. And basically what this is saying is you want button 2's left layout attribute, so the left side of button 2, to be exactly negative 12 pixels from the right of button 1. So this makes a lot more sense to read and to use. The main downside of this is that it is a 7 line long method. There are 7 parameters. It's going to be a huge method. You're probably going to add line breaks like this. So we've created this constraint here, and we can store it to a variable, and then we can add it to our view so that when these buttons are displayed while your app is running, then it will lay them out according to this. So in my opinion, this is a lot easier and a lot more clear when working with other developers than this visual format language. I'm not saying to avoid the visual format language. It's very useful to know, and a lot of any constraint conflicts that might be printed to the debugger down here will often include what's going on written in this visual format language. So let's hop into the storyboard, and I'm going to do a little setup first to create a view controller with these 2 buttons in Interface Builder, and then I'll show you how we can do the same thing that we're doing in code here in Interface Builder.